Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm DJ Sixsmith. Welcome to Sit Down. Hanging out with Alex Winter, actor, director. Brand new film from him is Zappa. Alex, nice to meet you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, I hope you're good.
I'm doing really well, and I've enjoyed your acting. I love your work as a filmmaker, and
Oh,
Zappa
thank you.
was really cool. I mean, you got access to this treasure trove of Frank Zappa's world. So, what was it like just diving into that and putting this film together?
It was kind of a Herculean effort on all of our parts. We just wanted to tell Zappa's story. It's an amazing life story that I've always thought would be compelling to people, whether they were fans of his or not. So I approached his widow, Gail, who controlled the rights and ran the Zappa label all the way going back to the '60s, and she liked the idea of what we wanted to do, but didn't think it'd be doable without access to his vault. So that sort of changed all of our lives. We Once we had access to that, which was floor to ceiling media as far as the eye could see, we took it upon ourselves to preserve a bunch of that material that took us 2 years and a lot of money, and then we set about making the film after that.
I mean, it's everything from Eric Clapton at his house to his own films from way back in the day. So, what was the coolest thing that you discovered there? I mean, there must have been a ton, but what really stuck out to you?
Gosh, every day, we found stuff with him and Clapton, with Joni Mitchell, and with Hendrix. But we also found just incredible personal material that really spoke to those times. We found footage of the Sunset Strip in the '60s, which is extremely hard to find, very, very rare, and really evocative. Really showed you how the rock world evolved from the beginning in LA. And so every day we were finding, honestly, it was just like an embarrassment of riches.
What was the toughest part of making this film with so much of the story, with so much information? What were some of the challenges here?
It was everything was a challenge. For us, we were very focused on telling an emotional and dramatic story and not trying to cram every single factual detail about Zappa's life into a film. And so that allowed us to have some boundaries in terms of what we wanted to use and what we didn't. There is enough material for a 10-part series if somebody wants to do that at some point. But Mike Nichols, the editor, and I were most focused on telling the inner emotional life story and really focusing on those details. But even with those parameters, it was still very hard to make certain decisions when you just have that much media that covers that many decades.
Why do you think Frank Zappa has resonated with people for such a long time? I mean, listen, this guy has not been alive since the '90s. What is it about his story that separates him from some of the other greats in your mind?
I think that a lot of times artists are much more easy to pigeonhole. They're either just like a rock guy, or they make more iconoclastic music, or they're interested in politics and activism. The thing about Zappa that's so unique is he was all of those things. Like, he was genuinely all of them. He was a brilliant classical composer since he was in his teens. He was also a virtuosic rock guitar player. He was also a political activist. So he just embodied so many different things with so much passion and commitment. It's very uncommon, frankly. And I think that makes him a really compelling character to watch.
So you spent so much time studying this compelling character. What are the unanswerable questions in your mind? Like, if you could sit down and talk with him, what would be the thing that you would ask him about?
I mean, I don't know if he'd be able to answer the unanswerable questions. I think that when you live a life like that, are you satisfied? Do you ever feel like you've succeeded in whatever this incredible mission was that you set out for yourself, that you went after with everything you had at the expense of everything else and paid enormous consequences for? I think that people wonder sort of how he defined himself, like what sort of artist he saw himself as. I also, especially in this day and age, I'd be really curious to know what he thought about the world today, about America today, about personal liberty and how we see ourselves as a country and where we're going, and about the world. He saw the digital revolution coming way before anybody else. I mean, he knew in 1989, 90 that music was going to be all online, that all these industries were going to be completely upended by digital. And even, that's 10 years before Napster. So there's a lot there that I would want to talk to him about in terms of, because he was just so engaged with so many aspects of modern life.
This idea of how we label people and things is really interesting to me, not only in our own lives, but in our careers. And you can obviously speak to that as you started as an actor you get into directing, and you did Showbiz Kids, which really encompasses so much in your life story. So for you personally, what was it like to put that one together?
Well, Showbiz Kids is a film I've been wanting to do since I started making documentaries about 10 years ago, because it is probably the closest I'll get to an autobiography, even though I'm not in the film. It's completely my story, and it's a story of all these other subjects. So one of the things I love about making docs is that you can really get into so much of the nuance of stories. You don't have to fall so hard into black and whites. And uh, the idea of being in entertainment as a child is so complicated. It is the highs are really high, the lows are really low, and then there's just life in the middle. So I was really interested in trying to tell that story, a story that really encompassed all of those experiences, as opposed to just saying it's all just a cautionary tale, don't do it, or it's amazing. You should sacrifice everything and go do it. So I'm really happy we got to tell that story with HBO. They did an amazing job platforming it, and look, we've released three movies during a pandemic. That one and Bill and Ted 3 and now Zappa. And it has been incredibly complicated, I will say. But I'm really grateful for the way the films have been received so far. So the year's been terrible in many ways. I wouldn't be cavalier about a pandemic that's killed so many people. It's been really awful. But we've managed to navigate, I think, pretty well and get these films out there.
One of the really interesting things to me about that film was that you have everybody that's talking about their experiences, but you go all the way back, you show what's going on today. I mean, this is a timeless situation, but for you in particular, what was it like seeing kids today doing the same stuff that you were doing when you were a kid, just in a much different way?
Well, I direct a lot of kids, and I've always done that. I've always done a lot of whether it's commercials or TV shows or whatever. I've worked with a lot of child actors. Plus, I have children, from college age to elementary school still. So it's been really fascinating to watch, how culture has changed, how the internet has changed both the entertainment industry and what it means to be a child. It's disrupted everything, obviously, including the notion or even the definition of childhood. So, because so much more is accessible to you as a child, the world is so much more in your face than it was when I was a kid. But also, you have access to the world to connect to the world. So it was interesting. It was so tragic that Cameron Boyce died so prematurely. He was a huge Disney star. But it was really interesting talking to Cameron because he was very bright. And my childhood experience with acting and his were very similar.
Hmm.
Neither of us were dragged into it by our parents. Both of us knew at 5 years old we wanted to be on stage and just got ourselves on stage. And yet Cameron came up in the age of Instagram. So his every single move he made from the time he was 5 was documented and baked into the digital landscape forever, right? We know how that works. There's no tag backs, right? That's it. It's out there. It's out there for life. And I talked to him about that off camera, just like, I don't know what I would have done. Like, I don't know how well I would have handled that because I made so many mistakes and I did so many things that were embarrassing or that I wouldn't have wanted in some kind of permanent record. And it's a pressure that I can't even really contemplate in a way for these young actors coming up now.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about what Hollywood looked like before social media. Like people could go out and there weren't cameras in their faces everywhere. Like you could actually have a good time with people. So it's nice that you had that runway to make some of these mistakes and not have it last on Google for the rest of your life.
Look, childhood, I mean, I would argue that life in general is about making mistakes and learning from them all the way to the very end, unless you're Buddha or something. But for the rest of us normal people, but childhood especially, all the way up until your teens is it's about making mistakes and learning from the consequences of those mistakes. The idea that that has to all be kind of somehow perfectly presented in a digital form that will make or break your life or your career is kind of unimaginable.
So Bill and Ted has been a big part of your journey, obviously. When you think about where it started to where it's gone, what's the wildest part for you? The fact that you got to jump back in, the fact that it's continued, what really stands out to you all these years later?
Well, I mean, Keanu and myself and the two writers, Chris Matheson and Ed Solomon, we worked very hard to get this film made for over 10 years. So it wasn't like, I didn't get that kind of quick, oh, wow, I'm back playing Bill. I got like maybe we'll do it next year. Maybe we'll do it next year. Maybe we'll do it next year for like 10 years. So look, we really had great faith in the script they wrote and we really believed very much in it. after for many decades not thinking or even wanting to make a third. We just love the idea of revisiting these guys eh, as adults, but presenting them as adults, not trying to pretend they're like kids locked in adults' bodies. So we loved that idea. We thought it was both hilarious and heartwarming. Um, but I think the thing that I get the most of a kick out of at this point is the multi-generational aspect. That obviously I've been getting recognized for being Bill since the late '80s, and I'm completely at peace with that. It's a beloved character. It's actually quite sweet to have fans that come up to you and are immediately happy. Um, Even if I don't deserve that for any personal reason whatsoever. Uh, but now there's like little kids and like, the parents have turned their kids onto it, then their kids have had kids of their own and their kids are into it. So that's a pretty special thing to have being part of your life and, whatever other things you're doing in your career or your life. My kids get a kick out of it. We'll have little kids run up to us on the street and they're just super jazzed. And I think that's quite sweet.
That's really awesome. And that movie's now out on Blu-ray and DVD. And Alex, I actually spoke to Ed earlier today. He's friends with my boss, and he had some really great things to say about you and just your growth overall. But when he was talking about when you all got together the first time, he said that you were always really thinking like a director and a producer, even when you were an actor. So was that something you always thought about? Were you conscious of the fact that you thought differently than some other actors on set?
Yeah, I started making films when I started acting as a child professionally at age 9, 10. I was on stage on Broadway, TV commercials, things like that. But even then, I was making films and I wanted to go to film school. So I saved up all my Broadway money and put myself through NYU. And then I came to LA and started acting in those movies. So I was already directing professionally at the same time I started acting. And I was always doing all of it at once. It's very sweet of Ed. He's a really close friend of mine, and I have huge respect for him as a writer. He's one of the great screenwriters, I think, of our time. But I will say that I tend to be pretty compartmental. When I'm on set as an actor, I do not have my director's cap on. I really don't. I really put myself in the director's hands, and it's a very different discipline. It's like I guess it's like being a musician and a conductor or a composer. Like I don't objectively look at myself while I'm acting. I think I would have a nervous breakdown. I think like when I'm playing Bill, I mean, I'm really just playing Bill. Like I was not, Dean was directing. I was just playing Bill. Like really early on, they asked me if I would have, they weren't offering it to me or anything, but they asked me if I had any interest in directing the third one. And I was like, absolutely not. I'm not playing Bill and directing. There's no way I'm doing
Yeah,
that.
that's a lot. That's a beast in and of
Yeah,
itself.
too
And
much.
the cool thing is that you and Keanu have obviously been buds for a long time, but you two can really bounce off of each other. And from what I've heard from folks on the set was that you leaned on him, he leaned on you. He's coming out of John Wick. You're helping him get back into Bill and Ted. You haven't been doing the acting thing for a while. He helps you. What was most important about that relationship with this last movie here?
Well, we really have a very fraternal relationship. We're kind of like brothers in a way. We've known each other so long, and we've both been through so many things in life at this stage. But I do think at the end of the day, we've just always had each other's backs with whatever the other is going through. So we give each other a lot of latitude. But once we got on set, Bill and Ted is a lot about play, and there's a certain aspect of playing certain characters when you're acting that's very much like play. It's almost doing more like clown work or physical comedy. And we really just enjoy being in that playground together. It's fun, and so I think that was kind of an unintended benefit of doing the film for both of us was like we both came at it as very in a very professional way of like studying and rehearsing and like going through the script. But at a certain point, we had the wardrobe on, and we just had to do it. And what that means is actually quite instinctive. It's like playing in a band with somebody. Yeah, we've been in the same band for a long time. We were off the road for a while, but when we got the instruments back on, we were like, "Oh yeah, we know how to do this." And it's actually I like playing with you. It's fun, you know.
We started with music. We end with music right there. Alex, really nice to meet you, man. I appreciate the time and enjoy the holidays. All right.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, thanks so much.